So here we are, we've looked at this, and I wanted to present to you a case of what's called sui generis AI law, which is probably something they're going to be working on. I can't see this fitting in any other way. Otherwise, they have to make a big legislative change, and that's just probably not going to happen. Now, the reason I'm proposing this sui generis customized view of AI generated work is because right now there's agencies and people doing work with commissions being told and instructed what to do to create images like cases we've shared with you before, and they'll use AI. But that AI does not convert copyright. And in a normal US work for hire, where I'm a consultant, an agency, an artist, whatever it is for a specific task, the person who creates the work gives the copyright and the entire package to the company or person buying it. That is the normal process. It makes total sense, doesn't it? Then create something with AI and you don't have the copyright. And for the most part, people are just being transparent about it. But if there's any liability, if the AI hallucinated and the person giving it didn't check it, that liability goes to the person who bought it, even though they don't own the copyright. So let's look at a new model of how we might do AI generated work with authorship and ownership. Clear criteria for determining this. How much effort? Where we go beyond prompts? What's required? How do we even do this with text, which is proven almost impossible to really detect? The duration of protection. One thing people complain about copyrights in traditional ways is how long they are. I mean, I took research back into the history of copyright. There was somebody way back in the Middle Ages in England who for 50 years had the exclusive copyright in the whole area. The only one who was allowed to get copyrights. Does that even make sense? There's other people who've gotten copyrights and then had them taken away. It's a really volatile space. So the duration matters. A lot of people are saying that it's too long today, that you basically, in the US, a lot of it's dependent upon your death, and then there's a period after and your people can renew it. But basically, copyright only has a fixed duration. Are those durations too long? Are they based on older days? And for AI generated work, it's clear. We're looking like 5 to 10 years. It's something much shorter because a lot of the purpose of copyright is to put the good stuff into the public domain so they don't have to pay for it. And if this wild amount of creativity with AI happens and we're just all putting it behind paywalls and different things where you have to have passwords to get in, we're going to miss the whole point of it, aren't we? Fair use and exceptions. Fair use is really important. I'm going to do a whole episode on fair use. Fair use principles say there's reasons for me to use it, like being a journalist, being a researcher. There's many different ways that people can use it and be able to use the content without taking it. Certainly it doesn't mean take the book. You might take a quote. This doesn't mean like reporting a whole video. You might take 5 or 10-second clip out of one so you're not impacting the value, because that's what's important with copyright. If your work impacts the future value, that's really damaging. And that is why so many creators are up in arms about AI taking their content, because it is impacting the value, whether you or anyone else thinks it's creative or not. Licensing and attribution. How are we going to license this and how are we going to track it? Because once it gets into the chat GPTs, you can track to what are called influence vectors maybe, but it's very iffy. This is not like a guaranteed science. So really at the point it goes in, you're going to have to establish some point of either paying for that content or compensating the person who created it or notifying them. And how does that person have a right to say no, or even better, say no first and have to give you permission rather than permission being assumed as we've done now? Oof, this is where a new case for AI generated art is so important, because very little of this from the old world really applies. And you hear this in many legal briefings I've looked at. The lawyers agree. The old world rules are really hard to apply here. But first, we still got to figure out what we're doing with putting that data in, who gets paid, is that right, and can we sort of control it and still encourage people's creativity? Now in the US, you'd have a lot of trouble with this kind of law. You would have conflict with limited times requirement. In the Constitution, the copyright clause says for a limited time. If you go to AI generated works, they can be produced so rapidly and in such quantities. Think of like NFTs putting out 256 monkeys. I mean, it's just easy to auto-generate this. Are we going to just create these monopolies and stop the flow of creativity into the public domain? I'm not really sure that's a great argument, but the limited time is going to be shorter. That's sort of the feel I get from most of what I'm looking at. The conflict with author and inventor's requirement. The copyright clause grants exclusive rights to authors and inventors. Generative AI, while it's able of producing creative work, doesn't have that human element and doesn't really know where to put it all together from. It can't really even prove the trail of what created this from individual content. It doesn't make sense in a world of tokens and transformers. So that weird word authors applies because if you give generative AI recognition as an author, a whole bunch of things start getting open that we never thought of. So as silly as it is, I don't think the people running this have anything against it. There's no place yet. We haven't quite figured it out, which is why I want you to comment, share, let me know what you think. What's happening with AI copyright? That's what I'm trying to research and put out so we can provide it as an alternative to just these government, regulatory, big tech approaches to copyright. Get your word in.